She hid their son from the billionaire CEO. Now the boy's the only one who can save his life. I'll do it. The stem cell thing. But I have conditions. The billionaire tech mogul, now frail and tethered to hospital machines, raised his eyebrows in surprise. Even facing death, Marcus Reed wasn't accustomed to being given terms. Conditions? He asked weakly. 3 of them, the 12-year-old boy stated firmly, holding up fingers to count. First, if this works and you get better, you have to use some of your money to help kids who need bone marrow donors but don't have matches. Second, you have to tell me the truth, always, even when it's hard. And third, he glanced at his mother before looking back at the father he just met. You have to promise not to try to take me away from Mom or make us move. We can visit, but this is my home. Have you ever wondered what it would take for a child to negotiate with the father he never knew? A father who now needs him to survive? What would you do if the person you ran from to protect your child suddenly became the person your child needed to save? If you've ever had to make an impossible choice to protect someone you love, hit that like button now. I'm Mr. Harrison, and today I'm sharing the remarkable story of a mother who hid her son from a ruthless billionaire for 12 years, only to discover that this boy is now the only person who can save his father's life. The sterile hospital corridor seemed to stretch endlessly before Nora Winters as she approached room 742. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by 12 years of secrets and the impossible choice she now faced. The antiseptic smell burned her nostrils, a harsh reminder of the reality waiting behind that door. Behind that door lay Marcus Reed, tech visionary and ruthless business titan, hooked to machines that kept his failing body alive. The man whose empire she had once helped build as his executive assistant. The man who had loved her fiercely, possessively, until she discovered the darkness beneath his brilliance. The man she had fled from in the dead of night, carrying their unborn child, a son Marcus never knew existed. Until now. Ms. Winters. A voice pulled her from her thoughts. Dr. Sharma approached, clipboard in hand, her expression grave. The doctor's white coat seemed too bright under the fluorescent lights. I'm glad you came. Mr. Reed's condition has deteriorated further. The genetic compatibility tests confirm what we suspected. Your son is the only viable donor match we found. Nora closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself against the wall. The cool surface anchored her as the world seemed to tilt. And there are no other options? None at all. We've exhausted every alternative, Dr. Sharma replied gently. Without the stem cell transplant, Mr. Reed has weeks, perhaps days. With it, his chances improve significantly. The irony wasn't lost on Nora. Marcus Reed, who had built Quantum Horizons into a $40 billion tech empire, who had crushed competitors and reshaped entire industries with a single decision, was now utterly dependent on the child he never knew, the child Nora had hidden from him to protect. I need to see him first, Nora said. Alone. Dr. Sharma nodded. Of course. He's conscious but sedated. I should warn you, he's not the man you remember. Nothing could have prepared Nora for the sight that greeted her when she finally entered the room. The steady beep of monitors created an eerie rhythm in the otherwise silent space. Marcus Reed, once commanding, vibrant, intimidating in his sheer force of will, lay diminished against white hospital sheets. His once powerful frame had withered, his bronze skin now ashen, his sharp features hollowed by illness. Only his eyes remained unchanged, that piercing cobalt blue that had always seen too much. Nora. Her name on his lips was barely a whisper, yet it carried the weight of their complicated history. They said you might not come. I almost didn't, she admitted, remaining near the door, maintaining the distance that 12 years had carved between them. Her fingers clutched her purse strap, needing something to hold on to. Yet here you are. A ghost of his former smile crossed his face. Still the most unpredictable woman I've ever known. Marcus, Nora began, then faltered. How to condense 12 years of absence into words. How to explain the fear that had driven her away, the desperate need to protect her child from the ruthlessness she had witnessed in the man she once loved. They told me, he said simply, saving her from the explanation. About the boy. About Leo. The sound of her son's name on Marcus's lips sent a chill through Nora. "How did you find us?" "I didn't." A bitter laugh escaped him, ending in a ragged cough that shook his entire frame. "Ironic, isn't it? 12 years searching, using every resource at my disposal. And in the end, it was my failing body that led me to my son." He paused, studying her with those penetrating eyes. "Why, Nora? Why did you run?" The question hung between them, unanswered for so long. Nora moved closer, finally taking the chair beside his bed. The vinyl squeaked beneath her as she sat. "You remember the Westlake acquisition?" she asked quietly. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You saw the board meeting." "I saw everything," Nora confirmed. "I saw you destroy a man who trusted you, who considered you a friend. I watched you dismantle his company piece by piece, put 500 people out of work, all while promising him you were there to help." She met his gaze unflinchingly. "I saw the real Marcus Reed that day, a man who would sacrifice anything, anyone to win." "Business isn't personal," he said, the words automatic, rehearsed. "Everything is personal, Marcus. That's what you never understood." Nora's voice softened. "I was carrying your child. I couldn't bear the thought of raising him in your world, watching him become like me." Marcus finished, no accusation in his tone, only a weary acceptance. "Yes." Silence settled between them, filled only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the mechanical whoosh of machines keeping Marcus alive. A nurse passed by the door, her soft-soled shoes squeaking on the polished floor. "Is he?" Marcus hesitated, vulnerability showing through cracks in his carefully constructed armor. "What is he like, our son?" Something in Nora's chest tightened at the question, at the genuine longing in Marcus's voice. "He's brilliant like you, sees patterns others miss. But he's kind, Marcus. Deeply, instinctively kind in a way that can't be taught." She smiled despite herself. "He builds things to help people, not to control them. Last year, he created a device to help his friend with cerebral palsy communicate more easily. He was 11. Pride flickered across Marcus's gaunt features, followed quickly by regret. 12 years, he murmured. 12 years I'll never get back. "I did what I thought was right," Nora said, not apologizing but acknowledging the cost of her choice. "And now?" Marcus asked, his gaze intense despite his weakened state. "Will you let him save me, knowing what you know about who I am?" The question cut to the heart of Nora's dilemma. She had come to the hospital prepared to refuse, to protect Leo from the man whose DNA he carried but whose life he had never been part of. Yet seeing Marcus like this, stripped of his power, facing his mortality with a clarity she had never witnessed in him before. "That's not my decision to make anymore," she finally said. "Leo is 12 now, old enough to know the truth, old enough to decide for himself." Marcus's eyes widened slightly. "You told him about me?" "Last night," Nora confirmed. "Everything. Who you are. Why I left. What you need from him now." The night before had been the hardest conversation of Nora's life. She'd sat Leo down in their modest living room, the same room where she'd helped him with homework, celebrated birthdays, and built a life that had never included Marcus Reed. "There's something I need to tell you," she'd begun, her voice trembling. "Something about your father." Leo had looked up from his science project, dark curls falling across his forehead. "You said he was gone." "I said he wasn't part of our lives," Nora had corrected gently. That wasn't the whole truth. As the truth spilled out, about Marcus, about quantum horizons, about why she'd fled, Leo had listened with an intensity that reminded her painfully of his father. When she finally explained Marcus's illness and the genetic match, Leo had asked only one question. "Does he know about me now?" "Yes," Nora had answered. The hospital found the connection through genetic testing. Leo had been quiet for a long time, his fingers tapping that familiar rhythm against his knee. "I want to meet him," he'd finally said, "before I decide." Now, in the hospital room, Marcus was watching her with renewed hope. "And," he asked, "what did he say?" "And he wants to meet you. Today." before he decides. Something like hope flickered across Marcus's face, quickly tempered by caution. He knows this isn't just a blood draw, that the procedure is more involved. Nora nodded. Dr. Sharma explained the stem cell donation process to both of us. Leo understands what would be required of him. Brave kid, Marcus murmured. He is, Nora agreed. Braver than either of us, I think. The door opened then, and Dr. Sharma appeared with a nurse. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to check Mr. Reed's vitals and administer his medication. Nora stood, relieved for the momentary reprieve from the intensity of their conversation. I'll be back in an hour, with Leo. As she turned to leave, Marcus called after her, his voice stronger than it had been since she entered. Nora, thank you, for coming, for telling him the truth. She paused at the doorway, looking back at the man she had once loved, once feared, now reduced to something achingly human. Don't thank me yet, Marcus. He still has to make his choice. Have you ever faced a moment where your past caught up with your present in ways you never imagined? Share your experience in the comments below. In the hospital cafeteria, Leo sat hunched over a cup of hot chocolate, his lanky frame and serious expression making him appear older than his 12 years. Dark curls fell across his forehead in a way that painfully reminded Nora of Marcus at his most unguarded. Steam rose from his cup, creating a small cloud between them. Is he awake? Leo asked as Nora slid into the seat across from him. Yes, and he knows you're here. Nora studied her son carefully. Are you sure about this, Leo? You don't have to meet him. You don't have to do this. Leo's fingers tapped a restless rhythm against his cup, a habit he'd had since childhood when processing complex thoughts. Did you love him before you left? The question caught Nora off guard. In all their conversations about Marcus, Leo had never asked this. Yes, she answered honestly. I loved him very much. Then why were you so afraid of him? Nora chose her words carefully. I wasn't afraid of him exactly. I was afraid of what he might teach you without even trying. Your father lives by different rules, Leo. He believes winning justifies any means. That power is its own morality. And you think I'd become like that? Just because he's my father. There was no accusation in Leo's tone, only genuine curiosity. His eyes, so like Marcus's in color but softer in expression, searched her face. No, Nora said softly. That's what I realized last night. Watching you process everything I told you. You've always had your own moral compass, Leo. Even as a little boy. Leo nodded, absorbing this. The cafeteria hummed with quiet conversation around them. A normal day for everyone else while their world tilted on its axis. I want to meet him, he said finally. Not just because he's sick or because he needs something from me, but because he's part of who I am. I need to see for myself. Nora reached across the table, squeezing her son's hand. Then let's go. The walk back to Marcus's room felt both too long and too short. Outside his door, Nora paused, turning to Leo. Ready? Leo straightened his shoulders, a gesture so reminiscent of Marcus preparing for a crucial negotiation that Nora's breath caught. Ready. They entered together, Nora slightly behind, allowing Leo to lead this moment that belonged primarily to him. Marcus had been propped up slightly in bed, an apparent effort to appear stronger than he was. His eyes, however, were fixed entirely on Leo, taking in every detail of the son he had never known with an intensity that seemed to fill the room. Hello, Leo, Marcus said, his voice steadier than it had been with Nora. I'm Marcus. Leo moved forward slowly, studying the man in the hospital bed with equal intensity. You look like me, he said simply. Or I look like you, I guess. A smile touched Marcus's lips. The Reed jawline. My father had it too. Did he teach you? About business and stuff? Yes, Marcus answered, something darkening in his expression. Though perhaps not the lessons I needed most. Leo moved closer, perching cautiously on the edge of the visitor's chair. Mom says you build things that change the world. I built a company, Marcus corrected gently. Whether it changed the world for better or worse depends on who you ask. The honesty of this response seemed to surprise Leo. Would you do it differently? If you could start over? The question hung in the air, weighty with implications beyond a simple business strategy. Marcus's gaze flickered briefly to Nora before returning to Leo. The machines continued their steady rhythm, marking time in this suspended moment. Yes, he said finally. There are many things I would do differently. Leo nodded, as if confirming something to himself. Then, with the directness only a child could manage. Are you scared? Of dying? Leo, Nora began, but Marcus raised a hand. It's a fair question, he said. And yes, I am scared. Not of death itself, perhaps, but of leaving nothing behind that matters. His eyes held Leo's. Of never having the chance to know my son. Something shifted in Leo's expression, a recognition of the truth in Marcus's words. He was silent for a long moment. Then, I'll do it. The stem cell thing. But I have conditions. Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly, a flash of his old self showing through. Conditions. 3 of them, Leo confirmed, holding up fingers to count. First, if this works and you get better, you have to use some of your money to help kids who need bone marrow donors but don't have matches. Second, you have to tell me the truth, always, even when it's hard. And third, he glanced at Nora, then back to Marcus. You have to promise not to try to take me away from Mom or make us move to wherever you live. We can visit and stuff, but this is my home. Nora felt her throat tighten with emotion and pride. In his own way, Leo had addressed every fear she'd carried for 12 years, setting boundaries that even Marcus Reed would have to respect. Marcus was silent, studying the boy before him with new understanding. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Those are fair terms, Leo. You have my word. Leo hesitated only briefly before taking his father's hand, sealing a pact that would change all their lives. Their hands, one small and strong, one thin and weakened, formed a bridge across the years of absence. The days that followed moved in a blur of medical consultations, paperwork, and preparations. Dr. Sharma explained the procedure in detail, how Leo's stem cells would be harvested and transplanted to Marcus, how the recovery would work, the risks and potential complications. Through it all, Leo remained calm, asking thoughtful questions that impressed even the veteran medical team. He's remarkably composed, Dr. Sharma told Nora as they watched Leo chatting with a nurse who was drawing yet another blood sample. Most adults would be more anxious. He's always been that way, Nora replied. Even as a baby, he seemed to understand more than he should. The night before the procedure, Nora found herself unable to sleep. She slipped out of the hotel room they'd taken near the hospital, careful not to wake Leo, and made her way to the hospital. It was well past visiting hours, but the night nurse recognized her and nodded her through. Marcus was awake, staring out the window at the city lights. He turned when she entered, not surprised by her presence. I thought you might come, he said. Nora moved to stand beside the window. I needed to ask you something. Ask. Are you going to keep your promises to him? Really keep them? She turned to face him fully. Because if this is just another negotiation to you, another deal to win at any cost. It's not, Marcus interrupted. His voice was quiet but firm. I've had a lot of time to think, lying here, about what matters, about what doesn't. 12 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you, Nora said. 12 years ago, you would have been right not to. Marcus shifted, wincing slightly at the movement. The man you ran from wouldn't have kept those promises. But dying has a way of clarifying things. And if you don't die? If this works? Marcus met her gaze steadily. Then I'll have to prove it to both of you, day by day. I don't expect trust, Nora. I haven't earned it. But I'm asking for a chance. Nora didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked out at the city below, the place where she'd rebuilt her life after fleeing from Marcus. She thought of the small apartment where she'd raised Leo, the community college where she'd finished her degree while working nights, the software company where she now led a development team. A life constructed carefully, deliberately, without Marcus Reed's money or influence. Leo deserves to know his father, she said finally. But on his terms, not yours. I understand that now, Marcus replied. It took me too long, but I understand. The morning of the procedure dawned clear and bright. Leo was prepped first, the doctors explaining each step as they went. Nora stayed by his side until they wheeled him into the collection room. I'll be fine, Mom, Leo assured her, his voice steady despite the 4 in his arm. It doesn't even hurt that much. I know you will, Nora said, squeezing his hand. I'm so proud of you, Leo. So proud. As they took him away, Nora found herself alone in the waiting room. The hours stretched endlessly, her mind replaying the path that had led them here. She remembered the night she'd left Marcus, 7 months pregnant and terrified, driving through darkness with only a hastily packed bag and the resolve to protect her unborn child. She changed her name, moved across the country, used her savings to start over in a city where Marcus had no connections. The first years had been the hardest, working whatever jobs she could find while caring for an infant, jumping at shadows, always looking over her shoulder. But Leo had made it worthwhile. From his first smile, his first steps, his first words, he had been the center of her world. She'd watched him grow into a thoughtful, brilliant child who saw the world with compassion and curiosity. A child who built things to help others, who stood up for classmates being bullied, who seemed to understand instinctively the responsibility that came with his natural gifts. Everything she'd feared Marcus would destroy. Ms. Winters. Dr. Sharma's voice pulled her from her memories. The collection was successful. Leo is in recovery now, and we're preparing to begin Mr. Reed's transplant. Can I see Leo? Of course. He's asking for you. Leo was pale but smiling when she entered his recovery room. Did it work? Did they get enough? More than enough, Nora assured him, smoothing his curls back from his forehead. You did great. Is he getting them now? My cells? They're preparing for his procedure. It will take a few hours. Leo nodded, then asked the question Nora had been dreading. What happens after? If it works and he gets better? Nora sat on the edge of his bed. What do you want to happen? Leo considered this, his expression serious. I want to know him, not all the time but sometimes, and I want him to keep his promises. I think he will, Nora said, surprising herself with the realization that she meant it. People can change, Leo. Sometimes it takes something dramatic to make them see what matters, but they can change. Like almost dying? Like almost dying, she agreed. And like meeting you. The next days were critical for Marcus. The transplant itself went smoothly, but the real challenge was whether his body would accept Leo's cells, whether the new immune system would take hold without attacking Marcus's organs. Leo recovered quickly from the donation procedure and insisted on visiting Marcus daily, even when his father was too weak to do more than acknowledge his presence with a slight nod. He needs to know I'm here, Leo explained to Nora, even if he can't talk much. A week after the transplant, Dr. Sharma delivered cautiously optimistic news. The preliminary indicators are positive. His body is accepting the new cells, and we're seeing the first signs of immune system recovery. So it's working? Leo asked eagerly. It appears to be, Dr. Sharma confirmed. There's still a long road ahead, but this is a very encouraging start. That afternoon, when they visited Marcus, he was sitting up in bed for the first time since the procedure. His face was still gaunt, his movements slow and careful, but there was new life in his eyes. The doctor says it's working, Leo announced as he entered the room. She says your numbers are good. Thanks to you, Marcus replied. His voice was weak but clear. I hear you're quite the celebrity in the pediatric ward. Something about teaching the kids there how to build robots from medical supply containers. Leo shrugged, but couldn't hide his pleased smile. They were bored, and the containers were just sitting there in the recycling bin. Innovation from available resources, Marcus nodded approvingly. The mark of a true entrepreneur. Or just a kid who likes building stuff, Leo countered. Marcus laughed softly. Fair point. As Leo launched into an explanation of his makeshift robot design, Nora watched the interaction with mixed emotions. There was no denying the connection forming between father and son, a connection based on shared intellect and curiosity. Yet she couldn't help the flicker of worry. Would Marcus's influence eventually overshadow the values she'd worked so hard to instill? As if sensing her thoughts, Marcus glanced her way. Something in his expression, a recognition, an acknowledgement, eased her concern slightly. This wasn't the Marcus Reed who had ruthlessly dismantled Westlake Technologies. This was a man humbled by illness, by dependency, by the discovery of a son who had been raised to value more than just winning. "Leo," Marcus said, interrupting his son's enthusiastic description of gear ratios, "have you told your mother about your idea for the foundation?" Leo straightened, suddenly serious. "Not yet. I wanted to make sure you were really going to do it first." "What foundation?" Nora asked. "Remember my first condition?" Leo turned to her. "About helping kids who need donors but don't have matches?" "Marcus, Dad, and I have been talking about starting a foundation that would fund research and donor registries, especially for mixed-race kids like me who have a harder time finding matches." "It was Leo's idea," Marcus added. "I'm just providing the funding and some business structure. He's the visionary." The pride in Marcus's voice was unmistakable, but it wasn't the possessive pride Nora had feared. It was something simpler, more genuine, the pride of a father recognizing his child's inherent worth, not as an extension of himself, but as a unique individual. "That sounds wonderful," Nora said, meaning it. "When did you two have time to plan all this?" "During the robot building," Leo explained. "Marcus can't do much yet, but he can talk, and I had ideas." "He certainly does," Marcus agreed. "Quite remarkable ones." As Leo continued outlining his vision for the foundation, Nora found herself thinking about the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. 12 years ago, she had fled to protect her unborn child from Marcus Reed's influence. Now, that child was not only saving Marcus's life but potentially transforming it, teaching the ruthless CEO lessons about purpose and legacy that no business school could impart. 2 months later, Marcus was discharged from the hospital. The transplant had been successful, though his recovery would continue for months. He had rented an apartment near Nora and Leo's home, a modest place by his standards, but close enough for regular visits as he regained his strength. "You could have stayed at the Westlake Plaza Hotel," Nora remarked when she and Leo first visited the apartment. "I'm sure the presidential suite would have been more comfortable than this." Marcus shook his head as he carefully lowered himself onto the couch. "Too many stairs. Too many people. This is better." He glanced around the simple space. "Besides, it's closer to Leo's school." Leo had already disappeared into the kitchen, investigating the contents of the refrigerator. "You have like no food," he called out. "Just protein shakes and weird green juice stuff." "The nutritionist's recommendations," Marcus explained with a grimace. "Apparently, billionaires don't get special dispensation from disgusting recovery diets." Nora found herself smiling at his discomfort. There was something oddly satisfying about seeing Marcus Reed, who had once commanded 5-star chefs in his corporate dining room, reduced to medicinal green juices. "I could make a grocery list," Leo offered, returning to the living room. "Mom's teaching me to cook. I make pretty good pasta." "I'd like that," Marcus said, his expression softening. "Though I'm not sure how pasta fits into my approved foods list." "I'll figure it out," Leo assured him confidently. "I'm good at working around restrictions." As Leo settled on the couch beside Marcus, pulling out a tablet to start his grocery planning, Nora was struck by how natural they looked together. The physical resemblance was undeniable, the same jawline, the same way of tilting their heads when concentrating, but it was more than that. There was an ease between them that had developed surprisingly quickly, a connection that transcended the years of absence. "How's Quantum Horizons managing without you?" Nora asked, taking a seat across from them. "Better than I expected, honestly," Marcus admitted. "Eliza Chun is handling the CEO duties temporarily. She's been my COO for 5 years. Brilliant woman. Much better with people than I ever was." "Will you go back?" The question came from Leo, his eyes serious. Marcus considered this. Not in the same way. The board has suggested a less intensive role, Chairman, perhaps focusing on long-term strategy rather than day-to-day operations. He smiled slightly. Apparently nearly dying has made them reconsider the wisdom of having a workaholic CEO with no succession plan. And what do you think about that? Nora pressed. I think. Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. I think I've spent 20 years building something that consumed every part of my life. And now I have a chance to build something else. Something more important. His eyes met Nora's, then shifted to Leo. The message was clear. The Reed Stem Cell Foundation launched 3 months later, with Leo proudly standing beside Marcus at the press conference. Nora watched from the sidelines as her son explained to reporters his vision for expanding donor registries in underserved communities. My dad and I started this foundation because we know firsthand how important finding a match can be, Leo said, his voice steady despite the bank of cameras. But we also know that many people, especially those with mixed ethnic backgrounds, have a much harder time finding donors. We want to change that. Marcus, still thinner than his pre-illness days but regaining his strength, added, the foundation will fund research, donor drives, and support services for families navigating the transplant process. Our goal is to ensure that no one dies waiting for a match that might exist but hasn't been found. The press ate it up, the billionaire CEO saved by the son he never knew existed, now working together to help others. What they didn't see were the private moments. Marcus learning to be a father, Leo cautiously allowing him into his life, Nora navigating her own complex feelings about the man who had once driven her to flee across the country. It wasn't always smooth. Marcus occasionally slipped into his old commanding ways, particularly when foundation business intersected with his corporate world. Leo pushed back when necessary, reminding his father of their agreement. And Nora remained vigilant, ready to intervene if Marcus's influence began to overshadow the values she'd instilled. But there were beautiful moments too. Marcus attending Leo's science fair, beaming with genuine pride as his son explained his latest invention to judges. Leo visiting Quantum Horizons headquarters, wide-eyed at the scale of what his father had built but more impressed by the research lab than the executive suite. The three of them sharing dinner once a week, building a new kind of family from the fragments of the past. 6 months after the transplant, Nora found Marcus sitting alone on a bench in the park near her apartment, watching Leo play basketball with neighborhood friends. She hesitated, then sat beside him. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. Marcus smiled slightly. Inflation's hit hard. They're worth at least $1 now. Fine. $1 then. He was quiet for a moment, watching Leo execute a perfect jump shot. I was thinking about what you said that night at the hospital. About being afraid I would teach Leo the wrong lessons. Nora followed his gaze to their son. And I think he's teaching me instead. Marcus turned to face her. All those years building Quantum, I thought I was creating something that would last. But companies change, markets shift. What Leo showed me, what you both showed me, is that the only legacy that truly matters is how we affect the people in our lives. That's quite a revelation from Marcus Reed, corporate raider, Nora observed. But there was no bite in her words. Near-death experiences tend to clarify priorities, he replied. As does discovering you have a remarkable son who sees the world with clearer eyes than you ever did. They sat in companionable silence, watching Leo play. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the court, the children's laughter carrying on the breeze. Thank you, Marcus said finally, not just for letting him save my life, for raising him to be the person who would want to. I didn't do it for you, Nora reminded him. I know. That's what makes it matter. Another silence fell between them, different from the tense quiet of the hospital room months ago. This was the silence of two people who had traversed an impossible path and found, if not peace, then at least understanding on the other side. He wants to stay overnight at your place this weekend, Nora said eventually, to work on the robot for the children's hospital. Is that okay with you? Nora considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, the idea of Leo spending the night under Marcus's roof would have terrified her. Now, she found the fear had largely faded, replaced by a cautious trust built day by day, interaction by interaction. Yes, she decided. It's okay with me. Marcus nodded, understanding the significance of her answer. I'll make sure he calls you before bed. And no staying up all night in the workshop, she added firmly. He still needs regular sleep, even if you've programmed yourself to function on 4 hours. Doctor's orders for me too, remember? 8 hours minimum. Marcus smiled ruefully. Though I admit, old habits die hard. As Leo jogged over to them, flushed with exertion and victory, Nora reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. 12 years ago, she had fled in the night, determined to protect her unborn child from Marcus Reed's influence. Now, that same child had not only saved Marcus's life but had, in many ways, saved Marcus himself, showing him a different way to measure success, a different kind of legacy to build. Did you see that shot? Leo asked excitedly. Right from the three-point line. Impressive, Marcus agreed. Though your defensive positioning could use some work. That's what Coach Williams says too, Leo admitted. I get too focused on where the ball is going next and forget where I should be now. A common problem, Marcus said, in basketball and in life. Leo rolled his eyes at the philosophical turn. Are we still on for the robot workshop this weekend? Absolutely, Marcus confirmed. Your mother has approved the sleepover. As long as you maintain reasonable human hours instead of my former vampire schedule. Mom made you promise about bedtime, didn't she? Leo asked, grinning. She did, Marcus admitted. And it's a condition I intend to honor. Leo's smile widened at the reference to their original agreement. You've kept all your conditions so far. I plan to continue doing so, Marcus said seriously. They were fair terms. As they walked home together, Leo between them chattering about basketball statistics and robot designs, Nora caught Marcus's eye over their son's head. There was a question there, an uncertainty that the confident CEO would never have shown before. Nora gave him a small nod, an acknowledgement of how far they had come, of the fragile new reality they were building together. Not a reconciliation, too much had happened for that, but a different kind of relationship forged through their shared love for the remarkable boy between them. A boy who had saved his father's life in more ways than one. If this story of forgiveness and second chances resonates with you, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more powerful stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Life rarely gives us neat endings. For Nora, Marcus, and Leo, their story wasn't ending but evolving, day by day, choice by choice. The past couldn't be erased. The years of absence, the fear, the secrets, but it could be acknowledged, understood, and gradually healed. Leo would grow up knowing both his parents, understanding the complex history that had separated them and the unexpected circumstances that had brought them back into each other's orbits. He would carry his mother's compassion and his father's vision, tempered by the wisdom to use both for good. Marcus would continue his recovery, both physical and spiritual, learning to measure success not by acquisitions and market share but by moments of connection and purpose. The Reed Stem Cell Foundation would become his true legacy, helping thousands of families find the matches they desperately needed. And Nora would gradually release the fear she had carried for so long, watching carefully as Marcus proved, day after day, that his promises to Leo were more than negotiation tactics. They were commitments he intended to honor for the rest of his life. Sometimes the people we run from are exactly the people we need to face. Sometimes the secrets we keep to protect those we love become barriers to the healing they need. And sometimes the most unlikely circumstances, even a life-threatening illness, can open doors to redemption and second chances we never imagined possible. As Leo had said that first day in the hospital, looking at the father he had just met, "You look like me. Or I look like you, I guess." Identity, legacy, connection. These were the threads that had finally woven 3 separate lives into a new pattern. Not perfect, not without complications, but authentic and, in its own way, beautiful. In the end, it wasn't about hiding or revealing, fleeing or returning. It was about finding the courage to face the truth, whatever it might be, and building something new from what remained. That was the real transplant that had taken place. Not just stem cells from son to father, but hope, forgiveness, and the chance to begin again.